So here we go. It's time to do the preview of the quarterfinal matchup in the MLS's playoffs. And one thing that I'm going to bring back in the preview is the prediction box. So remember how I said earlier that I wasn't going to do the prediction box because of the fact that I've already made a prediction in terms of the overall playoffs and I fill in the bracket? Well, yeah. As you probably know, that bracket that I fill is so busted right now, and pretty much I got only 2 games that was right out of the round of 16 matchup, and how most of these matchup that is happening in the quarterfinal is definitely not the matchup that I predicted that was going to happen in the quarterfinal. I thought I'm just going to bring back the prediction box because, again, these are matchup that I did not expect it to do, and since I did not expect that these are the matchup for the quarterfinal, I have to, of course, do a prediction for these game and bring back the prediction box, which also could means that I'm going to either make better prediction or I am once again going to make some terrible prediction, and that I could once again go 0-4 and have to wear the golden sombrero if I get all these game wrong after this. But that being said, let us actually get into the quarterfinal matchup, and we start off with looking at the Eastern Conference game because that is going to be taking place on Sunday, while the Western Conference game is going to be in the middle of the week on Wednesday. And I know there's already a lot of people that is very pissed off, especially fans of the Western Conference team that are very pissed off the fact that the quarterfinal game are taking place in the middle of the week on Wednesday and Tuesday, because that means the semifinal is gonna be taking place next Saturday, and that they only had 3-day rest in terms of doing that compared to Eastern Conference team where they get a full week of a rest. And I don't blame them either, because of the fact that I just don't understand why couldn't they make the quarterfinal being on the weekend, where you can have the Western Conference game taking place on Saturday and the Eastern Conference game taking place on Sunday, or vice versa, or just kind of mix it around. But I don't know why they didn't do that. I guess the scheduler probably feel like they want to spread things out, because there isn't really a lot of sports that is going on, and they want to kind of spread things out so that at least we get like a game every single day, or every other day in this case. But that being said, let us actually get into the first game, and I'm not going to do a timestamp. I haven't been doing timestamp throughout this playoffs in terms of the preview, because there's really not a lot of games that I have to preview, so I'm going to once again not going to do timestamp since I only have 4 games to preview. And why should I actually give you like timestamp in terms of all these games when these are the playoffs and you want to definitely hear me talk about each of these big matchup that is happening in the quarterfinal? And we start off with the first matchup between Orlando City versus New England, which is going to take place tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, and that this is going to be the only day game that's going to be happening in the quarterfinal, and I believe this game is going to be on ABC. Orlando, of course, they were involved with that crazy penalty kick shootout that is definitely going down the history books as one of the craziest playoff game, and probably one of the lowest point in terms of MLS refereeing that we have ever seen, by beating NYCFC in a 6-5 penalty kick shootout at home, which is at an E here. So while New England, well, they were one of a couple of teams that were part of some big upsets that they of course were able to give two teams that were favorites in terms of winning the MLS Cup, and one of those teams are the Philadelphia Union and the Supporter Shield winner, as they were able to take them down and knock them out in the first round by winning 2-0 on the road. And in terms of the last 5 head-to-head matchup, well, this is actually the first meeting between both of these teams this season, but when you look at the last 5 head-to-head match, yeah, there has been a lot of goals that has been scored in this fixture. First of all, the last time both of these teams met at Explorer Stadium, it was a free draw between both of these teams. Then New England was able to win 4-1 at home against Orlando before winning 2-0 at home against Orlando City. And then the other matchup that took place at Explorer Stadium also end up in a free draw, which I'm not sure if that's a coincidence, the fact that the last 2 games that's taking place at Orlando in this fixture ended in a free draw, but that could also maybe be a sign that there's going to be a lot of goals that's going to be scored in this game. And then the other matchup that took place at Explorer Stadium, yeah, Orlando City absolutely destroying New England by winning 6-1, which I believe that was the biggest margin of victory that they ever had at home in their club history. And again, I think if you look at these last 5 head-to-head matchup, there probably is going to be goals that is scored in this game, and that, you know, since both of these attack are very decent attack, we could be seeing some goals, and once again seeing some crazy score lines that's going to be happening in this game. But that being said, in order for those goals to happen for Orlando City, you know, I know the key points coming into this game is obviously going to be what's going to happen now. Now, the fact that Brian Rowe is going to come into this game because Pedro Gallese not available in this game after getting that second yellow in the penalty kick shootout and get himself sent off. So will Brian Rowe actually come in? Which, you know, I thought Brian Rowe this season, when he does have to come in for Pedro Gallese, either for international duty or in this case when he's suspended for this game, he's have definitely looked decent, but certainly I wouldn't say he is as good as and just able to make a lot of key saves to keep his team in a game as what Gallese has been. But, you know, the other thing that I think is something that people forgot and haven't really talked about is the fact that will some of these young attacking players like Daryl DK and Chris Mueller will finally step up in the playoff game. I know in the last game against NYCFC they were really quiet and that they weren't really in this game, and that when you're in the playoffs you definitely need your best player to step up, and we know Nani is one of those guys that definitely stepped up in the last game by scoring the only goal in regular time for Orlando City. But you also need to have some of your young guys and some of those guys that have been having a great season like Daryl DK and Chris Mueller to really step up and score the goals in this game. Now for New England, will the strong road form continue for this team? Obviously this team has one of the best record on the road this season, and I always talk about how, for whatever reason, New England, when they go on the road, this team looked like a much more dangerous team when they're playing at home, and it looked like this is a team that could definitely make a deep playoff run whenever they go on the road, which is kind of weird because usually MLS teams don't do well on the road compared to when they're playing at home, but this is kind of the opposite, and then it kind of showed in that game against the Union where they were able to win that one, and that because of the strong road form and the fact that they are able to cause some upset whenever they go on the road. It happened in that last round game, but the question is, can it continue in this game against Orlando City, which is a team that also have a very good home record? And then the other thing I will ask for New England is that can the attack continue to be lethal in this playoffs? Obviously, I know in the last couple of games this attack have definitely showed up, but the question is, can they show up for the third straight time? And that we've seen this season where, as strong as this New England attack is, there's been times where there's an inconsistency, and there's times where they kind of look like they're out of ideas whenever they go on the attack and go on to the final third, and either they just keep overplaying it in the final third, or the fact that they just don't have their shooting boots and cannot put away chances when they need to do. So it will be interesting to see whether or not if they can get rid of that inconsistency, because this is definitely not a game you want to have those old habits of having guys like Gustavo Bo, Adam Buxa, or even Carlos Hill who started to struggle in terms of going in the final third, and they aren't able to find goals in this game. And, you know, again, I think this is a game that there's going to be a lot of goals that's going to be happening in this one, so you definitely want to make sure you have your attacker to be in form in this one. But that being said, in terms of my prediction, you know what? I'm going to go with another upset here. And I'm going to say New England is going to do it, and that I think there's just something about Bruce Arena in the playoffs, and that I think in the last game there was definitely the sign that he is definitely turning back the clock, and that he is once again showing that Bruce Arena, whenever he coached an MLS team, he always find a way to get that team into a deep playoff run, and especially with the squad that New England has, which I think this is probably one of the most underrated squad in the league, and that not a lot of people give enough credit that this New England team is actually a very good team, especially on the defensive end, where they actually have one of the best defensive record in the league, and also they have a goalkeeper named Matt Turner, who is one of the best goalkeeper in the league, and almost came close of winning goalkeeper of the year this season. I think this team can definitely really surprise a lot of people. When Bruce Arena gets a good squad to work with, he's gonna do some magical thing in the playoffs, and that something tells me old Bruce is turning the clock back, and that he is gonna get this New England team on a deep run that not many people thought that it was going to be the case coming into the playoffs. And that for Orlando, again, as good as their attack is, in the last game they at times kind of struggle on the attack, and that I just don't know if those guys like DK and Mueller, if they don't step up again in this game, this could be a bit of an issue with the way that if they don't score enough goals to potentially win this game, they potentially could not be move on into the next round, knowing the fact that New England does have the attacking threat to potentially score a couple of goals in this one. So yeah, I'm going to go with an upset and say that New England is going to win on the road against Orlando City. But moving on in terms of the next match is the match that I know I talked about yesterday in the news of the week, where this was a match that was in serious jeopardy of potentially getting postponed or canceled because of the fact that there was 6 crew player that was tested positive for COVID-19. Well, today I have heard some numerous reports saying that this game will actually be played, despite the fact that there were 6 crew player that's been tested positive for COVID-19, which I guess that's good news for Columbus, because that means that they probably will play this game and don't have to worry about them having to force to forfeit this game because they have a COVID outbreak. But that being said, the bad news is we still don't know who exactly those 6 players are and how many of them are actually starters for this Columbus Crew team. Now, the last time Columbus the last game, of course, got them into the quarterfinal was a 3-2 win against the Red Bulls at home. While Nashville, I know many people say that was an upset. They got over TFC, but for me, I don't think it was really an upset, but more like Nashville just kind of execute the plan that they play against TFC, and that this was a TFC side that was heading into the playoffs very, very ice cold. And when you head to the playoffs ice cold and you face against a red hot team, that is exactly what happened, and that Nashville was able to win 1-0 on the road after extra time. And in terms of the head-to-head meeting, well, both of these teams have only met once in the league history, with Columbus winning 2-0 against Nashville. But obviously, as I said, Columbus, I think the key points coming into this game, or at least we're going to find out tomorrow, either when Caleb Porter released the starting 11 or hours leading up to the game, is that who are going to be the missing players coming into this game. If those missing players are some of their attack, or even some of their defense, or even some players from the starting 11, there is definitely a lot of concern if you're Caleb Porter. And the fact that we've seen before, when this Columbus Crew team is not in its full strength, this team does not look like a very decent team, and that there's definitely concern that could be the case heading into this one. But still, the question I will also said is that despite the fact that they, of course, are going to miss those players, can they still overcome this challenge of these missing players and still able to move on into the next round? Now, for Nashville, coming into this game, I know before I said that Columbus was the favorites in this one, but because of the fact that we don't know how many players from that Crew team that is going to be missing because of testing positive for COVID-19, all of a sudden, I think Nashville was the favorites in this one. And the reason why they're the favorites is the fact that, I already talked about how their defense has been very good this season. And I think as we head into the playoffs, this defense has even become more stingier, and a team that just always tends to frustrate you when you try to go at them. But I think the other thing that is a key point for Nashville, and a key question, is that will their DP attacker continue to contribute in the playoffs? Down the stretch, we have definitely seen some of these DP players that have stepped up, guys like the Kadits, Rendo Liao, and also Hani Mukhtar has really stepped up in the playoffs and really started to get this Nashville attack going, which is something that this team is kind of the biggest Achilles heel with this team, with the way that, as good as their defense is, their attack always tends to kind of sputter, but as we see in these past couple of games and down the stretch in the playoffs, their attack all of a sudden is starting to get going. And when they can get their attack going and these DP player can step up and contribute to score goals, all of a sudden this Nashville team is a really dangerous kind of team, and which is why I really think they can do it in this game and that they can win this one to move on into the conference final and become only the second expansion team to ever make it to the conference final. And you know, a little part of that is because of the fact that I think when Columbus, if they are going to miss so many players due to COVID-19, there's no doubt that I think that might be too much to overcome against a Nashville team that is red hot. But it's also the fact that I think Nashville are looking to get some revenge after that earlier matchup where they lost 2-0 on the road against Columbus. And that was a game I thought they played very well in that one. I mean, that was a game that the only reason why they lost was because they just don't have enough attacking pieces, or those DP attackers that they had just didn't really step up in this game. Well, knowing the fact that they have stepped up in the last couple of games, I think they, of course, will make a difference, and they should be able to move on into the conference final and, again, make history once again by becoming only the second expansion team to ever get to the conference final in MLS history. But that being said, I am now going to switch the boards and look at the Western Conference matchup of the quarterfinal. So now let's take a look at the Western Conference quarterfinal matchup, which the first game is going to be the Seattle Sounders versus FC Dallas. That is going to be kicking off at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific on Tuesday. This game, of course, is going to be on FS1, and in fact, both of these Western Conference quarterfinal game is going to be taking place on FS1. But for this one, everybody knows this is the rematch of last year's Western Conference first round matchup, where that was probably one of the craziest and probably one of the most memorable playoff game we have ever seen in the playoffs, where even though the Sounders eventually outlast FC Dallas by winning 4-3 after extra time, that was a game where Dallas tied the game 3 times in that one, and that was probably one of, if not the best playoff game I have ever seen Dallas play. And yet, unfortunately, they were on the wrong end of just such an instant classic kind of game we saw in that playoff in the first round of the Western Conference last season. Now, the Sounders, of course, they won 3-1 against LAFC at home in the last match, which that was really kind of like their first big test of potentially get over an LAFC team that, you know, yes, that was not a full-strength LAFC team, but it was still an LAFC team, have the likes of Carlos Vela and BWP, and they were able to convincingly getting the victory. And I really think with them knocking out LAFC, and now the Portland Timbers are out of the playoffs too, because FC Dallas was one of those teams that of course pulled off an upset and was actually the first road team to win in the round of 16 by winning 8-7 on a penalty kick shootout against the Portland Timbers on the road. Seattle is no doubt the favorites now coming out of the Western Conference, and they are really the best team if you look at all the team remaining in the Western Conference right now. But that being said, in terms of the last 5 head-to-head matchup, as I mentioned, the last time both of these teams met, both of these teams were supposed to meet in the MLS's back tournament, but we know what happened in terms of that time when Dallas, of course, was kicked out of the tournament because they had a COVID outbreak. So yeah, because of that, they never play in the MLS's back tournament, and that they actually never even met in the regular season this season. But the last time they meet was actually that crazy the first round Western Conference game where Seattle was able to win 4-3 against Dallas. Then it was a 3-0 win that Dallas put against the Sounders before the Sounders returned the favor in terms of completely dominating against their opposition at home by winning 4-0 against FC Dallas. Both teams then played to a 0-0 draw before Dallas did win 2-1 against the Seattle Sounders. And while Dallas does have a very good record against the Sounders at home, they do not have a very good record when they're playing against the Sounders on the road. And I believe they only won 1 time in their last 15 years, or 1 time in their all-time meeting against the Sounders whenever the game is is going to be taking place at not CenturyLink. Forgot it's not called CenturyLink anymore. It's actually called Lumen's Field right now. But obviously, if you probably know that, it's technically still the same company that is sponsoring the stadium name for the Seattle Sounders, even though they just recently changed their name for their home stadium. But in terms of the key points coming into this game, obviously for the Seattle Sounders, will the Big Three continue to put a dominant performance in the playoffs? And those Big Three I'm talking about is Ruidíaz, Ladero, and also Jordan Morris, that has just been lights out so far in the playoffs, especially in the last game where they were really at their best in terms of contribute on the attack, and that will be interesting to see if they can continue to do that in this game against Dallas. And for Dallas, the question is, will Luchi Gonzalez decide to go with another pragmatic approach coming into this game? There was no doubt that he went with a very pragmatic and kind of conservative approach against the Portland Timbers, which I think that kind of surprised a lot of people, because Luchi Gonzalez is not known to go with a very pragmatic approach. He always liked to have his team to be very risky, and hence that's why last year's game ended up to be such a high-scoring game, because he was not really thinking about just letting the Sounders have all the ball and we just kind of sit back and try to hit them on the counterattack. No, we were going toe-to-toe with the Seattle Sounders. We were going to push forward to try to match the good attacking threat that the Sounders had, and hence that's why the game ended up to be such a high-scoring game. Now, that being said, that game where it ends up into a shootout, and unfortunately, as I said, Dallas came on the wrong end of the shootout. Will Luchi Gonzalez see that by saying, well, it was great that we were in a shootout with the Sounders, but it didn't work that time. So maybe should I think about trying to once again go with a pragmatic approach heading into this game against the Sounders, and just kind of maybe sit back a little bit and hope to try to hit the counterattack. But either way, Dallas, I'm pretty sure this, I know the Sounders are heavy favorites in this one, but don't be surprised if Dallas pull off an upset, and that this could be definitely a tougher for a team that the Seattle Sounders is facing against Dallas compared to last year when they faced against a Dallas team. Because last season, they were facing a Dallas team that was mostly with a lot of young players that was very inexperienced heading into the playoffs. This time, they're playing another young squad that is relatively similar to the one from last season, but they have now got 2 years of playoff experience and also have a playoff win under their belt, which will give them a lot of confidence, and therefore there's no doubt that this time it's going to be much tougher if the Sounders are going to able to beat Dallas, and that they're about to face a much tougher Dallas team compared to last season. But that being said, I'm still going to pick the Sounders to win this, because I think at the end of the day they just have too much attacking power to overcome, and that even if Luchi Gonzalez is going to go with a pragmatic approach, it might work out against the Timbers, where the Timbers is kind of a team that does struggle in terms of trying to break down a low block. That's not the case for the Sounders team, especially with all those players and that big three clicking on all cylinders. They can definitely break down a low block team, and definitely could able to score a couple of goals against Dallas. But still, that being said, I still think this is a game that, even if the Sounders are heavy favorites, Dallas is going to once again put up a good fight and looking to pull off another stunning upset. But moving on, in terms of the last match in the quarterfinal, is Sporting KC versus Minnesota United, also known as the nicest derby in MLS, that is going to be taking place on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. SKC themselves was also involved in an instant classic playoff game that just happened in the round of 16, where they were able to outlast the Quakes in a penalty kick shootout by winning 3-0 in the PK shootout. But that game was at 3-3 when the game, of course, was into extra time. While the Loons, they were one of the few teams in the round of 16 that was kind of come off of a comfortable win, as they were able to win 3-0 against Colorado at home. And in terms of the last 5 head-to-head matchup between both of these teams, well, the last time both of these teams met, it was SKC winning 1-0 against the Loons before they did win again against the Loons, and that this was actually the first game back after the MLS is Back tournament where SKC was able to win 2-1 against Minnesota on the road. Then in the MLS is Back tournament, the Loons, of course, were able to win 2-1 against SKC. I remember that was the game where Sporting KC looked like they got all 3 points. Then Minnesota scored 2 stoppage time goals to pretty much grab a smash and grab victory to beat SKC in this one. But before that, it was Minnesota winning 2-1 against SKC, and then SKC winning 1-0 against Minnesota. And I am aware that SKC has never lost or draw against Minnesota whenever they play at Children's Mercy Park. But that being said, just because of the fact that past history does not favor Minnesota and that Sporting KC are going to be have that advantage heading into this one, we've seen this throughout this playoffs that past history doesn't really matter whatsoever. Heck, we saw it in the round of 16 matchup between the Union and the Revs, where I talked about how the Union not only have not lost a single game at home this season, but they have pretty much been unbeaten against the Revs in the last nine matchup. And then the Revs was able to win 2-0 and completely tore those past history and past head-to-head matchup into the trash. So we could potentially see it happen in this game too, and especially I'm actually kind of confident coming in to this game, and that I know this is probably the strongest Minnesota team that is going to be facing against SKC at Children's Mercy Park. And the big concern that I think SKC still has is that, one, this is probably the strongest team that they are going to face throughout the last couple of matchups that they've been playing. And two, we still don't know whether or not if Polito is going to be healthy. And if he is healthy in this game, then it definitely gives them a big boost on the attack. But if he is not healthy, then that could be once again a little bit issue for them going forward on the attack. But probably the third most important thing for SKC coming into this that could be a concern is, can they stop committing those old habits in the playoffs this season? I mean, in the last game against the Quakes, they basically commit 3 things that was kind of the reason why that 2019 Sporting KC side finished 11 in the Western Conference. One of them is defense. The defending was non-existent in that last game when SKC took on the Quakes, and the fact that they gave up 3 goals to the Quakes, and a Quakes team that's not known to score goals, especially on the road, that is definitely got to be a lot of concern if you're Peter Vermees about how bad the defense actually play in that one. And that the second thing that they commit in terms of old habits is giving up late goals. Just as they thought that they won it in the first minute of stoppage time in that one, they gave up a late goal to basically send it into extra time. Now, eventually that did not come back to haunt them, but we've seen before when teams have that habit of trying to give up late goals to their opposition, it can definitely come back to haunt them. I mean, just ask the Portland Timbers of how that went for them when they can see the late goal against FC Dallas in the round of 16. And the third old habits that I think this is actually one of the good old habits that they commit is the fact that they at least still won the penalty kick shootout, and Tim Melia is definitely considered the greatest penalty kick stopper that I think we will ever seen in this league. And there's no doubt if Minnesota is going to take this to a PK shootout, I am definitely very concerned because of the fact that Tim Melia is on the other side, and he knows how to of course win a PK shootout. But that being said, going to Minnesota in terms of their key points, obviously, will they finally get their first win at Children's Mercy Park? And kind of a little bit of a banter key points is that, can Adrian Heath, of course, stop treating this game as a throwaway game? I mean, I know in the past, when Minnesota play against SKC, I just don't understand why Adrian Heath just kind of act this as if it's a throwaway game and a game that we just go super conservative, try to play for a 0-0 draw and hope that it, of course, work out. And most of the time, or at least not most of the time, but every time, it just does not work whatsoever. So I'm really hoping he does not go very conservative coming into this game. I mean, I don't mind if he does sit back in this game and trying to hit teams on the counterattack, because that's what he likes to do with his team. But just don't. Just sit back and absorb all the pressure that SKC is putting on you, because if you do that and you aren't able to find a way to go on the counter attack and just getting pinned back in your own half, that is not a way to win a playoff game. Like, that's a recipe in terms of eventually giving up a goal and there's just no coming back for them. But that being said, in terms of my prediction, I'm going to say Minnesota. I am going to go, I wouldn't say this is an upset, because again, if you look at the quality between both of these teams, it's relatively equal, and that, again, I think this is probably the strongest Minnesota team that is going to be stepping to Children's Mercy Park to play against SKC. And that I'm also hoping the fact that, first of all, I'm hoping the Loons can actually start a game well and they don't come out of the gate off of a slow start like we saw in that game against Colorado. And that I hope we don't give up too many chances to SKC to potentially score, because I know in the last game, and I kind of mentioned this before, even though a lot of people saw that as a comfortable victory, yeah, remember those chances that we gave away to Colorado? If those chances were in the back of our own net, then this could have been a much more different game. And that, in other words, we cannot give those same amount of chances to this SKC team. That even though if they're not going to have Polito in this game, they still have some very dangerous attacking players like Johnny Russo and Kyrie Shelton and even Hurtado, who's come off the bench. And that the third thing I'm also hoping for them to potentially get the victory is that this attack can continue to could be very decent, and that Reynoso continue to do his magic. I mean, Reynoso, for these last couple of games, he has not only worth every cent of the amount that Minnesota paid Boca Jr. to get him, but he is becoming one of the most lethal number 10 in this league. And if he can continue to do that and continue to connect to our attacker, which, you know, we know some of our attacker like Kevin Molino and Robin Lod that has been just red hot right now in terms of goal scoring form, I can really see Minnesota winning this one, and I can definitely see the Loons moving on into the semi-final, or moving on into the conference final of the Western Conference, and finally get their first ever victory at Children's Mercy Park against SKC. And that, you know, even though we have never won in the past 8 meetings, you know, this would be the perfect time to get your first ever win, especially in a playoff game as important as this one is. But that being said, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video, and what do you think of all 4 of these quarterfinal games, and make sure, let me know in the comments below your prediction for all 4 of these games. And that I'm hoping that this time I'm going to be a little bit better in terms of my prediction compared to what the prediction I made in the round of 16, which, again, it was just god-awful. The fact that I only got 2 of them right compared to the 8 games that happened during the round of 16. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this game? And again, make sure you leave your comment below of the prediction of all 4 of these games. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.